Sonnet 116 by William Shakespeare. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. Before we get into this poem, I want to tell you a story from one of Shakespeare's plays. The play King Lear opens with a scene in which Lear's unmarried daughter, Cordelia, is being pursued by two suitors. Both are wealthy nobles, one from Burgundy and one from France. However, just before the two show up at court to woo Cordelia, Lear has had a falling out with his youngest daughter and has taken away her inheritance. Now, this is a big deal, of course, at the time, because it meant that Cordelia had no dowry or land to bring to the table. The first suitor, Burgundy, quickly bows out of the courtship, saying that if Cordelia has no wealth to bring to the marriage, he's not interested. France, however, takes a different approach. Far from rejecting Cordelia, he asks his rival Burgundy a pointed question. Love's not love when it is mingled with regards that stand aloof from the entire point. Will you have her? She is herself a dowry. When Burgundy rejects the offer again, France swears that he will marry Cordelia, who he describes as most rich, being poor. So what does the opening line of the play, King Lear, have to do with Sonnet 116? For one thing, you might have noticed the strong similarity between what France says in the play to the second line of the sonnet. Love's not love, France says. And the speaker in Shakespeare's sonnet says, love is not love, nearly word for word. Now, we don't know whether the play or the sonnet was written first, but it's probably more important to note that the poem and the play share a common theme, and that theme obviously is love. Notice that the word love is repeated 5 times in the sonnet. And if you add in related words like marriage, it becomes clear very quickly what Shakespeare's theme is. By the way, if you've ever read even a few of Shakespeare's plays, you'll likely have noticed that most of them deal with love in one way or the other. Not just romantic comedies, but the tragedies, histories, and romances as well. Shakespeare explores all kinds of love, from friendship to the love of God. But in this case of this sonnet, he seems to focus on romantic love. So what might Shakespeare be saying about love in this sonnet? First, let's define an important word, impediment. In line 2, that word had the same meaning really today as we use today, an obstacle. However, in Shakespeare's day, it was also used more narrowly to apply to obstacles to marriage. Now, how many of you have been to a wedding or seen a wedding on TV where the preacher says, does anyone present know a reason why these two should not be married? Well, that's a holdover from the old ceremony in Shakespeare's day, when the priest would ask the couple if either of them knew of an impediment, by which they meant a reason why they could not lawfully be married. So what would be an impediment to marriage in Shakespeare's day? Well, the most common one was one of the two was already married, and therefore they weren't free to take on a new wife or a new husband. It's likely, however, that Shakespeare was using this word even more broadly to mean any difficulty that might make a couple have second thoughts about marriage. There's loads of examples, again, in Shakespeare's play, most famously Romeo and Juliet, where the obstacle is that the two lovers come from feuding families. There are several examples in Shakespeare's plays where a father does not want his daughter to marry a particular man for some reason. For example, in Othello, Desdemona's father objects to his daughter's marriage largely because Othello is black. But back to the poem. Shakespeare's point seems to be that none of these obstacles should be allowed to stand in the way of true love, what he calls the marriage of true minds. By the way, I wonder why Shakespeare chose the word minds here instead of hearts. But perhaps Shakespeare's point is even stronger. He implies that those who let impediments get in the way are not truly in love at all. For love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds. For the rest of the poem, the speaker praises the constancy of love through the use of metaphors. In line 5, he compares love to an ever-fixed mark. This might be something like a lighthouse that serves as a guide for sailors at sea. He then compares love to a star, once again, some fixed mark that sailors use to navigate by. With line 9, the speaker begins to praise the longevity of love. Love's not time's fool, he says, though he has to admit that sometimes human love can be cut short by death. Notice also that time is capitalized here, so Shakespeare is personifying the concept of time. And in line 10, he adds the image of the grim reaper with his sickle. In line 11 and 12, Shakespeare continues praising love for its lasting quality. He says it lasts even until Judgment Day, which is what the word doom meant in Shakespeare's day. So to summarize, what are some of the qualities of love that Shakespeare finds most important? Love is committed and is intent on overcoming all obstacles. Love is constant. It is not fickle. Love is long-lasting. It does not change over time. Notice the closing couplet. Shakespeare ends the poem with a bold claim, actually a challenge to the reader. To paraphrase, if I am wrong about love here, I never wrote a poem, and no one has ever been in love. Now, obviously, both of those statements are ludicrous. Shakespeare wrote hundreds of poems, and the history of the world, from one perspective, is about people falling in and out of love with one another. At any rate, those closing two lines serve to help us see how strongly the poet believes what he is saying. A couple of final questions. What do you find most interesting about Shakespeare's definition of true love? Would you choose other attributes to define love? Compare Shakespeare's meditation on love to Paul's in 1 Corinthians 13. What similarities and differences would you find? I'll close by reading the poem one more time. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. It is the star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved.